Committee is called to order. Today, we have a presentation on workers and the impact of generative AI on the Minnesota job market. Today we'd like to welcome to our committee again, and thank you both Dr. Aaron Rosenthal and Dr. Manjeet Rege. And I'm so appreciative of both of you for taking time out of your busy schedules and to come back to the Minnesota Senate and tell us about this report on the impacts of AI. This is such a hot topic, and I know that just even over this past year since we've seen you last up in my district, this is a real topic of conversation. Even more last year, it did feel like it was just sort of a budding bit of conversation, but now our communities, many of them more and more are in the thick of these conversations, and so this issue is ever pressing for us. So we very much appreciate you being here and continuing the conversation that we began last year, and to learn about how things have evolved and are changing, perhaps. So I'll turn it over to you, and if you would, for the record, and for anybody who's listening online, introduce yourselves for our record, and then proceed with your discussion. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair McEwen. Thank you, members. I'm Aaron Rosenthal. I'm the Research Director at North Star Policy Action. We are a think tank dedicated to improving the lives of working Minnesotans. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Rege.
Sure. So thank you again for having us. My name is Manjeet Rege. I am at the University of St. Thomas. I am a faculty member as well as a department chair for software engineering and data science. And I also lead the Center for Applied Artificial Intelligence. So to understand the urgency we have in front of us, and we have to first of all recognize that AI of 2026 is fundamentally different from the ChatGPT that we saw a little more than 3 years ago. We have moved beyond the chatbot era into the era of agentic AI. On the slide here, we have the 35% win rate. What we are basically talking about is that on expert level professional benchmarks, the latest models like GPT-5 and its peers are now outperforming human industry experts more than a third of the time. And this isn't just about writing emails. It's about complex reasoning and professional grade reporting as well. The most important takeaway on this slide is the 7-month half-time or half-life. The complexity of tasks these systems can handle is doubling, twice a year approximately. If you find the current capabilities of AI startling, I think one thing that we all need to remember is that the systems that we currently have are the least capable AI that we'll ever have in our lives. The technology is moving very fast, but so is the enterprise level of usage as well. So 8 out of 10 companies today use AI very, very heavily. But we are also seeing a fundamental shift from using AI to operational replacement. This is already showing up in the hiring data. In sectors with high AI exposure, like software development, we have seen a 13% decline in entry-level hiring. So companies aren't necessarily replacing their senior experts, but they are using AI to do the work that they used to do with a junior staff. So this creates a training gap that we need to address immediately if we want to protect the next generation of Minnesota workforce. So this, brings us to the core reason behind this new report that we have put out. Last year, when we were here, we had talked about the 17% exposure of the Minnesota workforce to AI. That was based on some of the earlier data before generative AI became this popular. And that number, 17%, kind of felt manageable. But our new research reveals a much more sober reality. So when you account for the capabilities of generative AI, the number basically doubles. So 33% of all working Minnesotans, so that is more than 800,000 people, are now in highly exposed roles. So Minnesota now leads in Midwest in terms of AI exposure. And because our economy is kind of built on a lot of professional services, management, and high-tech sectors, we are on the front lines. So, and that is why this new research that we are basically putting out. So this 33%, what we are saying is that 800,000 or more people can have 50% or more of their job automated with generative AI.
So Dr. Rege has just pointed out how fast AI capabilities are rising, the extent to which it's being adopted by an increasing number of corporations and companies across the United States, the extent to which it's already starting to impact entry-level hiring in the U.S. What we have to understand is that at the same time that we're seeing this adoption rise and capacity rise, we're also seeing rising anxiety among workers. So the slide here shows you, obviously we've talked in the legislature a lot about different impacts of AI. We've seen hearings just yesterday on issues of AI related to privacy, related to youth use, related to misinformation and democracy. But when people are asked what they're most worried about when it comes to AI, it is the workplace. People are most worried that AI is going to impact their job. And this is not, as the slide also shows, a partisan issue. Roughly equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans, and a majority in each case, are saying that they are more worried about AI than they are excited about it. When we look at what workers are anxious about, certainly one thing is influencing their job, taking away their job, but there are other aspects of AI use that we should also be attending to here. So beyond job displacement, workers are particularly concerned about AI making final decisions in the workplace, right? We are seeing, and if you've talked to anybody who's applying for a job right now, you might have heard about AI interviews that they're dealing with, AI hiring processes. People are really worried about AI making final hiring decisions, final firing decisions, promotion decisions, and the like. In addition to decision-making, we're also seeing high levels of concern about AI-driven surveillance in the workplace. So AI being used to spy on people through their computer, tracking workers' movements, and so on. So these are important areas beyond this job displacement issue to think about, as it does reflect particular concerns that workers have about AI in the workplace. The final thing to note here in terms of public opinion is that people are increasingly calling for government to do something about this. And we are not seeing a whole lot of activity at the federal level, so this is really falling to the states to do something. And what these slides show you is that you have these overwhelming majorities, 80%, 75%, saying we want to see government regulation, even if it means slowing down AI innovation. Now, Dr. Rege and I are actually of the belief that those two things do not need to be seen as somehow in opposition to each other. Regulation does not mean slowing down innovation, but it's worth pointing out that that's the cost that people are willing to pay if it means that more regulation can be put into place. Now, we can contrast this high level of anxiety among people with relative legislative stagnation on this issue, particularly in Minnesota in terms of workers. So as is shown on the screen, Minnesota has passed some legislation on AI, mostly dealing with consumer privacy, with democracy, with misinformation, but the state has not done anything on AI as it relates to workers. And we'll contrast that against a couple of states that have been much more active. So Illinois has taken and passed several pieces of legislation dealing with AI as it relates to the workforce. But again, this is not a Democrat-Republican issue. If you look at Texas, a far more conservative state, they have also passed several more pieces of legislation on AI, and in particular in places where it relates to workers.
So our report, talks about exposure, and it is important to, make that distinction that exposure that we are talking about is not the same as replacement or displacement. So exposure simply means that a significant portion of jobs tasks can now be performed by generative AI at the same level of quality as a human. As you see here, this manifests three ways that a job can change. First is augmentation. So you get a powerful AI assistant who may just help you do more work. So more of the same work in the same number of hours. Second is transformation. That is, your job overall remains the same, but there could be some tasks that can be done with AI, and as a result, your job definition can change a little bit. So if you are primarily into writing, and if that writing is kind of taken over by a writing assistant, AI assistant, your role can kind of transform into that of, you might be a human editor looking over that written content. The third part of where we see exposure can lead to is that of displacement, where in the past, let's say you had 5 software developers, software engineers, a company might replace them with only 1, so you might have like 4 software developers getting displaced. So how did we get to these numbers that we are talking about? So we have combined 3 data sets to create a lot more localized lens for Minnesota. First, we utilized the gold standard global benchmarks from researchers at Oxford as well as at Wharton, University of Pennsylvania, who mapped generative AI capabilities to over 19,000 work jobs. We then cross-referenced that with the federal ONET database, which defines the granular, day-to-day duties of 900 different occupations. And then finally, we localized it using the Minnesota DEED data. And this allows us to account for our state's unique economic DNA. So our high concentration of management roles, which is why our findings are so specific to our region.
So when we apply this methodology, and again, high exposure in this case, in essence, means that generative AI could do roughly 50% of a worker's tasks or more. We see, again, about a third of Minnesota workers in this high generative AI exposure classification. If we look at very high exposure, where we're talking about 75% of a worker's tasks being potentially done by generative AI, we're looking at more like 110,000. One clarification I'll make here, we are talking exclusively about generative AI, right? So we're talking about chatbots and the like that create content for workers' jobs. So the legislature has heard testimony so far about things like Waymo, where you're looking at a driverless vehicle. That would not be captured in this analysis, right? That's a different version of AI. You don't have chatbots that are driving cars, but you still have artificial intelligence driving those cars. So we should just clarify, this is a subset of AI capabilities that's really confined to white-collar jobs, or mostly white-collar jobs. So as Dr. Rege pointed out, this roughly third of Minnesota workers that are in these exposed jobs makes Minnesota workers particularly vulnerable. So Minnesota's workforce is the 10th most exposed in the country and the most exposed in the Midwest. So if we look at a state like North Dakota, right, it's about a quarter of their workers in this highly exposed category. Again, Minnesota closer to a third. And what that means is that Minnesota's workforce is disproportionately in jobs that are likely to be impacted by generative AI. And so this slide just shows you what some of those larger roles look like, things like software developers, market research analysts. These are just jobs that are more plentiful in Minnesota as compared to our regional neighbors, and that's what makes Minnesota workers particularly vulnerable. If we break this down and look at some other ways of thinking about who's impacted, if we compare women to men, for example, female workers in Minnesota are more likely to be in highly exposed jobs. So about 4 in 10 women who are in these jobs in Minnesota compared to about a third of men. And then if we look at this in terms of union density, so basically, if you look at this slide in the top left corner of this graph, what you have there are industries where you've got relatively low union density and relatively high generative AI exposure, right? So jobs in finance, in information, in trade, in real estate, these are jobs where there's high generative AI exposure, low union density. As you move to the bottom right, you see jobs that are higher in union density and lower in AI exposure, things like education, for example. What this suggests is this mismatch that exists, where the workers that are most impacted by AI are also the least likely to have a union that can help them in shaping the way that AI actually impacts their job. So this has been referred to as this great mismatch in America's workforce, where worker voice seems to be missing in areas where AI exposure is higher.
Now, when we look at who's actually standing in the path of the frontier, it is no longer just manual labor being automated. It is cognitive and creative work. So interpreters and translators lead the list with a staggering 88% task exposure. Tasks like simultaneous translation and document proofreading are now core strengths of generative AI models. Legal and financial also follow very, very closely. So we aren't just talking about basic data entry here, but high-level legal research, contract analysis, and financial trend forecasting. So tasks that used to require a PhD or a JD as well. Marketing managers are already using AI for content and heavy usage of AI in that particular field. So these roles define Minnesota's white-collar workforce. which is why our state feels this impact so acutely. Minnesota's risk is highly concentrated in a few sectors. So professional and technical services have the highest overall exposure because they are built on the on management engineering roles that Gen AI excels at very, very well. Finance and insurance, we see a rapid shift in how claims are being processed and how risks are being assessed. The IT sector is particularly interesting. So while AI creates new tools, it is also impacting some of the entry-level jobs that I mentioned earlier. That is, 13% decline in the hiring of junior-level software development. Overall, as you heard, Minnesota ranks 10th most exposed state in the nation. Now, our report kind of lays it out in detail. We've also developed this interactive dashboard that people can, play around with. So here you can select a particular occupational group. So right now, we have all of the occupational groups selected. So if I go and select one particular one, like let's say computer and mathematical, right below that you see the total number of people employed in that particular occupational job, which is 97K. The number next to that is the average exposure for that particular occupational group, because that occupational group consists of a number of different jobs. Those you can see in the top right. And then the histogram at the bottom kind of tells you where do you see the most number of people falling in. So you can see that 43% of people in that particular occupational group tend to fall around that high mid 80s, 0.85, 0.87 in terms of high exposure. And then there are the few on the left-hand side, which is what brings the overall occupational group to 0.75. So similarly, if you go and look at construction, on the other hand, it's a lot less generative AI exposure. So the average AI exposure is only 0.07 versus the higher number that we saw with computer and more technical jobs. So, we can revisit this particular dashboard later if there is a question. I just wanted to share that here.
Okay, so at this point, I kind of hope that everyone is a little bit scared. I am a little bit scared about what this means for the future of Minnesota workers, and so I think it's important to talk about what can actually be done. The top line here is making sure that workers have the capacity to exercise voice in AI implementation. Again, we do not want to set AI innovation in contrast to worker welfare. There's no need to think about them as in opposition to one another. What we've seen already in certain cases is that when workers are placed in a position to provide feedback on how AI can help them in their job, workers, of course, being the experts on what they do, they actually can find that AI makes their job more meaningful, gets rid of routine, mundane tasks, and can help them feel more productive in their job. And that is, of course, the sort of transformation, augmentation that Dr. Rege talked about. On the other hand, if workers are not allowed to have a voice in the way that AI is utilized, I fear that we'll see a lot more displacement. And we have to understand those as two possible pathways that Minnesota is looking at right now, and that legislation will be key, I think, to deciding which pathway the state goes down. Beyond simply making sure that workers are able to exercise voice, there are what I've called the 3 Ds of AI risk that we need to think about. And I've already touched on these a little bit. But first is digital surveillance. So making sure that we're protecting worker privacy from invasive AI-driven data collection. We are already seeing AI models that are capable of predicting when people are applying for jobs, who's going to be pregnant, who is going to try to engage in workplace organizing. Remember that this data collection is all happening without people having any idea that it's taking place. We're seeing AI models capable of gathering information on what level of consumer debt people are carrying, and then offering wages based on the level of debt that people have. So if you have more debt, you get offered lower wages, right? And again, if you don't know that that's happening, and people applying for these jobs don't, or people being offered these wages don't, that's a real problem for privacy, for workers' data, right? So protecting data and making sure then that any data that is collected workers are aware of and are aware of the kinds of decisions that are being made with that data. And that brings us to the second D here, which is decision making, and prohibiting AI from making really important employment decisions, which again is a place where workers have been very clear, and the US public has been very clear that they do not want AI to be making really important employment decisions like hiring and firing, promotion, discipline, things of that nature. And then finally is displacement, right? And here, it's unclear, I think, where we are on the curve of workers starting to lose jobs due to AI. We may just be on the precipice of a big change. It is hard to predict. I think even people who are working every day in these AI companies will tell you it is hard to predict where we are on that curve. But we may be on the precipice of a big change, and it is time for the state to prepare workers for that possibility in terms of ensuring they have adequate notice if they're going to lose their jobs, and have opportunities for things like rehiring and reskilling in those situations. And I'll hand it to Dr. Rege to talk more about that.
So keeping with the theme of reskilling, worker retraining, I think that's extremely important. We need state-funded AI reskilling grants, specifically for those highly exposed sectors that we have talked about, such as legal, finance, and even for software development. We need to create pathways for people to be able to continue working with this new upcoming change that they have in front of us. Second, and this is really close to me being an educator, the state of Minnesota is ranked, the last time I checked, it was like number 48 in terms of all the states, in terms of computer science ranking in the nation. And that is for computer science. Now, if you look at AI, I wouldn't be surprised if that number is kind of low as well. So we must integrate AI ethics, practical prompt engineering, and such other AI education into our K-12 educational system. I think we are doing disservice, first as a parent as well as educators and lawmakers, if we are not able to prepare our next generation of AI workforce. And the third point here, we must boost the collective bargaining. So AI implementation should not be a unilateral decision made behind closed doors. So workers need a seat at the table to ensure that these tools are used to augment them and not replace them. So looking further ahead, we need to understand that AI as a technology is rapidly evolving. It is becoming more and more powerful. We are moving from chatbots, which are tools you simply ask questions, to agents, so which are systems that can automatically execute complex workflows. So this changes the workforce equation entirely. Roles will shift away from direct task execution and more towards strategic oversight and system governance as well. The future job isn't just doing the task, it's managing the AI agents that perform that task on our behalf. So this requires a level of human judgment, oversight, and ethical grounding that remains the ultimate competitive advantage for the human worker. To conclude, let's be clear. Minnesota, has a long history of leading the Midwest in fair labor standards and progressive economic policy. That legacy is needed now more than ever. Technological advancement and worker welfare are not opposing goals, as you also heard from Dr. Rosenthal. They are complementary, and if we act decisively now, Minnesota can become a national leader in showing that innovation can fuel growth and create better, more fulfilling jobs for all our citizens. We can ensure that the technological progress serves our workers rather than the other way around. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. Members, with that, I would like to open it up to comments and questions from our committee members. Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for the report. That we were here last year, and I was just getting to, probably the first time I was exposed to it, so a lot has happened in a year. A couple questions. I know you mentioned 2 states have some laws. Are there more? And then to that point of the policies, which policies or bills do you recommend that Minnesota follow after in some of those states, specific ones? Do we have some, or do you have some?
So I'll let Dr. Rosenthal also chime in here. I'll address the second part of the question about the bills. I would say the most urgent need, there is a shortage of AI skill set, and a number of companies have people who have worked at that company for a long time, so they are kind of domain experts. They know the company well, they know the process really well, but they don't have the right level of skill set. So I would say a bill that basically creates a pathway, some kind of funding for these people to get that right level of AI skills and continue being in a AI job in the future.
Thank you, Chair. Senator, so there are a few pieces of legislation that I believe are going to be heard on the House side in coming, I think, next week in relation to AI, again, dealing with some of these areas around surveillance, around decision-making, around displacement. The decision-making and digital surveillance pieces of legislation, I think you'll find, are modeled after some of the best practices that we've seen considered in other states. It's not a one-for-one for any existing bill. I think they pull together some different elements from what I've heard about what is included in them. Displacement is a tougher situation. A lot of the displacement legislation that's been considered has been done on a job-by-job basis. So saying, for example, we do not want to allow, I think Illinois has done this for community college professors, for example, saying AI can't be used to replace community college professors. I think Texas has done something similar for mental health professionals, saying AI can't be a substitute for mental health professionals. A more holistic approach, I think, would be to say, when workers face possible AI displacement, making sure, again, that they're given advance notice, something that allows for a transition that might be more comfortable for workers, so that we're not seeing sort of a huge number of workers fall off a cliff very quickly, ending up on unemployment, obviously straining that system. But then also, again, to Dr. Rege's point, trying to make sure that there is a system in place, or at least incentives for employers to provide retraining opportunities, rehiring opportunities. So again, if there could be state grants put towards those kinds of systems, I think that that would be a very effective approach for making sure that we don't see this sort of ripple effect through the economy where we see broad downturns coming due to AI implementation.
And maybe just to add to what Dr. Rosenthal said, I have this acronym in my mind, FTP, Fairness, Transparency, and Protection. So by fairness, I mean that if enterprises are using AI in some way, having a requirement that on day one, that AI might work fine, but over a period of time, there could be bias issues that can creep in. So requiring like an audit that, fairness is kind of there on a regular basis. Transparency, the point that Dr. Rosenthal made earlier as well, that if AI is being used for hiring, for monitoring, for evaluating the individual on a regular basis, then the individual must have a say in it. And finally, P is the protection, which is something that I mentioned, that is a number of people might be caught off guard when they suddenly get displaced due to AI taking over. So when that happens, there needs to be some mechanism in place for them to get that skill and hopefully get a new job.
Senator Dornick.
Madam Chair, thank you. Just one other question as far as the data. I mean, that's got to be hard to get the data, all that you have, especially when you speak to the 4Ds, the digital surveillance, this final decision-making, displacement, maybe not as hard, but how did you gather that to know, as far as some businesses, I wouldn't think they'd want to tell you. How'd you come about to that information?
Doctors.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, Senator. So the data that we're using here really speaks most to this sort of displacement concern. And again, we're talking about AI exposure. So what we're talking about is generative AI being able to do a large part of a person's job, which to Dr. Rege's point doesn't mean that a worker will lose their job, but it's obviously a concern. If generative AI can do half or more of your job, then there seems to be a pretty big risk that your job may be taken away. If it isn't, again, if you don't have any say in how it might transform your job into something that you can do more productively. So what we did was took data from, again, OpenAI, Oxford, and Wharton created a data set looking at to what extent could generative AI complete specific occupational tasks. So, right, Dr. Rege talked about interpreters and translators. If any of you have experimented with chatbots and their ability to translate, it's pretty impressive what they can do. And of course, unlike a translator that might be able to do it for 3 or 4 languages, they can do it for hundreds. So it looked at basically how many of these tasks can generative AI take on, and then compared that to the tasks that actual workers complete in their jobs. So for a translator, what it found is I think there's like 12 or 13 tasks that are listed in ONET for what a translator does. Generative AI could do all but one of them, right? So that's 88% exposure for that worker, suggesting 11 of the 12 tasks that a translator generally does in their job, generative AI could do. So that was how we came up with this level of high exposure, the number of workers. One thing that I'll point out is that the model that we used was based on ChatGPT 4.5. That was what OpenAI was using at the time. That was their frontier model. I believe we're on 5.3, 5.3 now. So our analysis is dated. And unfortunately, it's really hard to put out something that isn't a little bit dated because of how, again, Dr. Rege talked about every 7 months capacity is doubling. So it's really hard to put out something that isn't at least a little bit dated. The last point about this movement from chatbots to agents, this movement from AI that responds to a particular question, right? You can say, I don't know, write me a report on something, and you might get a report back that is increasingly good. An AI agent, instead, you could say something like, create a website for me, and it will spend 2-3 minutes, something that might have taken a software developer 3 or 4 hours previously, and create a pretty decent website for you. That's the transformation that we're seeing moving forward. And of course, our analysis, for the most part, isn't engaging with that possibility and that sort of capacity of AI either. So in that sense, our analysis is also very dated. What I would say is across the board, assume that that 800,000 number is an incredibly conservative estimate for the real number of workers who are at risk of having their job deeply impacted by AI.
And just to add to what Dr. Rosenthal said, even though our research is very latest, it's becoming dated because we're only talking about generative AI, and then maybe I can help explain the difference between generative AI. So there is AI, there is generative AI, there is AI agents, and then there is agentic AI. So we are not covering a lot of these subfields. So let's say you want to travel to a particular place, right? Currently, you may either go and do it online on your own, or you might, call a travel agent. Now, you can have an AI agent that can basically mimic a travel agent. And you can have specifications like, I want to fly to Australia, I wouldn't want to pay more than a particular price, all of these specifications, and I want a particular weather when I land there. All of these things an AI agent can look into and make a reservation for you. Now, that AI agent, so that's an AI agent. Now that AI agent can maybe partner with like an immigration agent. And that immigration agent may look into your passport details and come up and say that, maybe your passport is out of date, or maybe you need to reapply for a new one. You need a visa to get to a particular country. So not all of that workflow may be taken on by one agent. It could then be outsourcing that to a specialized sub-agent. So when you have multiple AI agents working together, that's when you get this agentic AI world. And you see this in cybersecurity as well. Gone are the days when somebody would sit in the basement and try to hack into a system. Now you have like an army of AI agents trying to attack, an intrusion attack, as well as from a defense perspective, cybersecurity, you'll have an army of AI agents trying to defend a network as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for those information. So just one last point here, the action plan preparing for the workforce. I think they're good. Just one thing, that being in the trades, and you went to construction, and that we're not going to be as replaced as quickly. Just wondering if you guys would maybe add or thinking more about, as our young kids going to high school, that I'm sure they are, it's kind of in there, giving up to speed. It's like, hey, some of these jobs we need to maybe divert to something else, and we've been doing that. College is a great opportunity, but it's not for everybody. And then we're kind of more pushing towards the trade, encouraging those who want to work with their hands to go into those. There's great opportunities there. So I would encourage that also, just to educate our young as they're making these occupation decisions with this in mind, because this is going to continue to rapidly change, as you guys have said. And we don't know what we don't know. We can speculate. But anyways, I would add that to one of the preparing the workforce. But thank you. Appreciate your report.
Thank you, Senator Dornick. Members, any other comments or questions for our testifiers today? Yes, Senator Kubek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, when I hear the news stories about AI, it goes one of two ways. It is a lot of what you've said today, and then there is always, I think, from the AI industry, this thing, well, this is also going to create so many new jobs, and there will be this new realm of employment. And I always find that a little dubious, but having said that, are there areas where there would be potentially new employment or new jobs created from AI? And then secondly, I guess, what would be, for some of these jobs, I would imagine that would be a steep learning curve of retraining of workers, and how would that go? So kind of a two-part question, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Doctors?
So I think no matter which job you look at today, there is a higher level of exposure. But when you hear about these new jobs getting created, that person in the current job is not well equipped to transition into that new job, right? So that's why we were talking about that reskilling. So let's take an example of a software engineer. 3 years ago, the way software engineering was being done, when you actually wrote a program, that has completely changed with a number of tools where you can express something and it generates code for you, but you still require knowledge to evaluate that code. So today, if a software engineer goes in with that mindset that existed 3 years ago, that person may not be employable as much. So there is this new job of a AI software engineer that has emerged, but is the current software engineer prepared for that? So there is that new job. So that transition, that transformation of existing jobs is happening for a number of white-collar jobs. Business analysts, data analysts, work that was typically done with a lot of Excel spreadsheets and typing up those formulas, you can now express that with generative AI. But I go back to the same question, is the person prepared to make that transition?
I agree with all of that. I would add, I think that the history of technological advancement has been one of technological change in which, coming out of it, you couldn't have imagined the creation of these new jobs. Everything all the way back to the agricultural revolution through to the computer revolution has had these moments of disruption due to new technologies, and yes, jobs have been found on the other side. One thing to be concerned about is often those periods, those transition periods, are marked by deep levels of inequality. And so that's something that we should be very careful about guarding against, is that as people are pushed out of old jobs and potentially into newly created jobs, are those jobs of equivalent quality? Or are we simply talking about huge amounts of wealth concentration as basically labor costs are pushed to zero for a lot of existing places? And so people are picking up really menial jobs that have been created and exacerbating existing inequality. The second thing that gives me pause in this transition is it is so much faster, right? When we talked about, the introduction of the smartphone was 2007. I think it took about 10 years to get to a point where you had like a pretty wide adoption of smartphones. ChatGPT got 1 billion views in the first month that it existed. The speed of AI capacity and adoption is simply different than what we've seen in past technological revolutions. And I think that requires slightly different levels of regulation and safeguarding to ensure that if this happens as fast as it seems like it could happen, people aren't pushed out really quickly without us basically having anything to catch them.
Thank you. Well, and one other thing that sort of makes me think of is this sense that with everything moving so quickly, as you've just articulated, and that combined with this profit motive that we have, especially being led by some extremely powerful actors throughout the world, further consolidating profit. You know, that throughout history, you said, you know, since the agricultural revolution, we've experienced these transition periods where we adapt and then sort of new jobs emerge. And I wonder myself, I'm wondering how that consolidation of power within our global economy is going to interact with this rapid advancement of generative AI and of AI in general, and how that that being used as a tool, not just for technology and development in and of itself, but for profit generation. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these corporations, they're driven for profit under the law. That is what they do. So that is something that is really on my mind, and how that speed and that the size of these essentially monopolies that we have worldwide in many ways are going to affect people. And I'm also wondering about, to Senator Dornick's point, the trades. Because a lot of the worry that I know that I have heard in my community over time, especially in the mining sector, is that danger of automation. So it's a different fear than generative AI, which is perhaps kind of potentially encroaching on some of, as you said, these white collar jobs. But then also, as we've seen over recent decades in the mining sector, increased automation. So now people talk about how up in northern Minnesota, the amount of workers that is required to extract ores is just much less because of the technology and the automation of that work in particular. And so I'm just wondering, I'm thinking to the future, and I'm wondering what are these jobs going to look like? What are they even going to be if all of a sudden we have this technology that is automating some of the more physical tasks that are done to actually do the physical work. And now we have generative AI that is doing some of those sort of agent tasks of actually producing work and then generating new product. I wonder what is left. I've always heard, or I've seen this meme on social media. I'm sure some people have seen. It's a meme where a person says, you know, I want robots and AI so that they'll do my dishes and vacuum my carpet and wash my floor, so that I can write and I can create art and I can do the work that I'm passionate about and use my skills and my imagination and be freed up to do those menial tasks that I don't want to do, or to help me, you know, in my work, so that I can kind of collaborate or have like a little assistant helping me in the ways that I want them to help me. But I don't want them to take away what I love or what I'm passionate about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, while a robot does the dishes, and while the person thinks that maybe I can create art is getting created by AI as well.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think a number of startups are coming up with humanoids that you can either purchase or buy. That's going to happen in the next couple of years. So I think the price point is something like 30, 35 grand, where you can actually purchase a robot that can do all of those tasks for you at home. And there are some ethical issues with that, where what if that robot goes wild? There are business models where companies are saying, well, we'll have a remote operator sitting elsewhere also monitoring the behavior. But then that leads to privacy issues. There's somebody else there watching through that robot as well. I forgot the question. I think I went off on a tangent there with the humanoids.
I mean, I would just say, you know, to Senator Dornick's point about the trades, I do think, I mean, you know, set aside the issue of AI, there's a clear need there for young workers to get into the trades. We need to build more housing in the state. We need to build more clean energy in the state. Like, there's clearly a need to get more young people into the trades. There's a huge job gap there. And so, yes, I think a lot of those jobs will be safer from AI. Again, Our report, our numbers are all based on generative AI, which is a bigger issue in white-collar work. I think if we were to expand our definition of AI, some of those construction jobs would also be impacted. But even so, I think the impact is likely to be less, given the direction that AI is going. In terms of the wealth concentration point and the speed of this transformation, again, that is the incentive of people who own companies. It's what they're supposed to do. So the question then is, what is the counterweight that's provided societally to ensure that it doesn't happen at that speed at the expense of everybody who doesn't then get to concentrate that money? And that is where I come back to I don't think there is a replacement for simply ensuring that workers have a voice in the way that this happens, so that as AI is implemented, they're able to provide feedback on what is helpful for them and are not simply pushed out of their job. I think that the best example of how this can work effectively is what we saw in the writer's strike that took place a couple of years ago, where writers were really concerned about AI being used to write full scripts, which of course AI now could very easily write full movies and even create the animation or whatever would be needed for the actual movie. What writers were able to stipulate in their bargaining, and this of course comes from the fact that they had a voice in this process, is we will be able to utilize AI so that they can write scripts along with AI and make them more productive, but they do not have to worry about AI being used to completely replace their jobs and write full scripts. At the end of the day, what that means is, look, studio owners still get to create more content because they have more productive writers. The writers don't have to worry about completely losing their jobs because they've been able to bargain for the way that they can use AI in a way that's helpful. And in the end, all of us get more shows and movies to watch while AI is washing the dishes. So, I mean, there are ways of thinking about societal wins here, but it comes from ensuring there's that correct balance of power in this negotiation between the owners and the workers.
Thank you very much. Well, on that note, thank you both very much for this report and for your presentation today. Oh, I had a quick question about that dashboard that you were showing us. Is that something that is available for people to check out on your website? Or
Yes.
Okay.
I can send a link over to Fabian, but if you go to my website, manjeetrege.com,
Okay.
you can get access to that.
Thank you.
The report as
Yeah.
well as the dashboard.
And kind of
both
play
are.
along with it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll make sure, members, that we send out the copy of the report if we haven't already, and then a link to that too, so people can kind of check out all those resources. I know that this is going to be just ever more a huge issue for our legislature to try to policy-wise really confront and have meaningful guardrails set up to protect Minnesotans in this advancement of this technology in all of these ways. So thanks very much for helping us get our minds around it ever more and try to think through what we need to do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. All right, with that, the Senate Labor Committee is adjourned. Thanks.